Alright guys, so here's the furnace we're working on today. I'm sorry I'm sending a lot of videos recently about furnaces, but that's what most of my jobs are during this time that have been failing now during the cold weather and all. So let me give you a quick update. Customer calls me the other day. I'm sorry you can't see my face. I'm not worried about it. I'd rather you see what I'm doing here than just looking at me. But what the customer said when he called me was that the furnace was making a weird noise, like it was winding down and it was blowing fuses. So that right off the bat is showing me there's a high possibility that the issue is just the motor that's situated right here where these two wires come out, negative and positive. And this is of course a blower that pushes air through the core. So let me just show you. I already took this out of the box. It was kind of annoying. I didn't want to record the whole process. Basically in this model, you see this little plastic bracket right here. It has one screw that holds this to the whole cage, and this model they actually installed all the screws around it, so I had to go around the cage inside the hole just with some bits. Let me show you my tool real quick. So this is the setup I used. I love this little angle adapter. It got me out of a pinch several times. So I was just using my impact with an extension with that so I could stick my hand in the hole and reach all these screws that were all along this edge. So let me just show you real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. See this hole here? That was one screw. That was another screw. And that was another screw. And it had one on the back side too, but you get the point. So after removing all those screws, that one screw, and disconnecting gas over here on this side, after you shut off gas, first that's what I did, cut off gas, I bled it through. In this case, customer is already a customer of mine from before, so we have this trust. I didn't need access on the inside. I told him make sure the fuse was good, but the thermostat was off so that I can just do everything from the outside because he wasn't going to be available to come over today, which isn't a big deal because I can do everything on a bench test. I just have this portable table. You see it's dirty, but it's just a work table. So going back, cut gas off. I bled this one out through the water heater. He has an instant water heater, so all I did was from the outside open up the valve to let water flow. The water heater detects water flow and it tries to light. So it lit a few seconds until the gas burned out. Once all the gas was out of the line, of course, it shuts off, and I'm safe to disconnect this without gas leaking and stinking stuff up with that smell of gas. So after that, I was able to just pull this right out of the cage, and that is what it looks like. So I may eventually do a whole course that teaches how furnaces work from scratch so that I can give you guys an idea of how troubleshooting goes, diagnosing goes when you understand the whole process. But basically in this case, this is where it's blowing air in through the motor itself. It's got another little squirrel cage here, smaller one, that's pushing air into the gas chamber, and then it goes through this core, goes down and goes the other way until it comes out this bottom hole. So that's basically how this works. So here's the blower pushing air. So this is all encaged, but this is what heats up once it lights up here. This is all hot. That's why you see those marks here where it got really hot. So the blower is just pushing air through that and going into the vents, so that it pushes this heat into your RV. That's basically it, summarizing how it works. So in this case, to start this process, what I'm going to do, I have my 12-volt battery, M12. This is what I use all my tools. They're all the same batteries. It's just a smaller one, but they're all M12 because it's so much easier to test everything on RVs. In this case, I know I've said this before in a video, but the right side is positive, the left side is negative. So since the issue was just the motor itself, I'm going to see if it blows a fuse or if I can tell that it's just rotating really slow. So here goes. Make sure these don't touch. Red wire on the right side, which is my positive. Black on the left side. There we go. So I've got this wire ready to go. I'm going to use a fuse. I'm just going to hold it. It's not going to shock. 12 volts won't do anything. So these are the wires. Yellow is negative. Red is positive. This is a Suburban furnace. And these two This is sending 12 volts to the thermostat. Sometimes the thermostat gets power from this, so when you disconnect the furnace, the thermostat just dies completely. Sometimes they feed a hot wire straight to the thermostat, and this doesn't matter. You might see one of these wires capped off, which is totally fine. But I'll show you here in a minute. What I'm going to do is connect the negative here, just so that we can have the ground wire, which is underneath this. So it's bolted onto the side. I'll show you in a minute. There's a little block on the cage, and that's where it's grounded. But the positive, instead of connecting the positive, though I could connect the positive wire, what I'm going to do is grab my positive from the blower itself, which is this one. I'll show you in a minute how I know which cable it is. I'm just testing the blower. I'm not worried about anything else right now. So we're going to see how the motor does. So I don't know if you can tell, but it is super weak. It is not blowing my fuse, but this is super weak. It should be that stronger. So that's just telling me that yes, there is an issue with the motor, but I will just confirm that. See the amp draw on this. So I'll get my multimeter here, which I have a video that says what tools I recommend, and I mentioned this, and I'm just going to see what amp draw I'm getting. Let's just put this on here on the negative so I can get the reading right here next to me. Let me grab that wire again. Let's see what's going on. Yeah, I'm not getting hardly any amps at all, but it's just a bad motor. I will go through the process just to check everything else out. We'll see what's going on here. If anything else is blowing a fuse, I can check. I've got plenty of boards on me. So let me hook the blower back up. And what I'm going to do now is just connect power straight to the board so that we run the whole furnace through the board. Okay, so I have my positive and negative tied into the wires that go to the furnace. So let me hook these back up because they're just popping out since I'm not using any connectors. It's just a quick test. It's not a big deal. And all I have to do is join the two blue wires, and it acts as a thermostat. So one is 12 volts hot going to the thermostat to feed at 12 volts. The other is just the return. When the thermostat's calling for heat, it sends the same 12 volts back through the other wire to tell it to turn on. So by joining these two, I'm bypassing thermostat and telling it to kick on. So let's see if it blows a fuse. Let me use that just to see what happens. So it's not blowing my fuse, but everything's working. At least the board's telling the motor to rotate. We'll see if it tries to go through the process to ignite. Just takes a few seconds, like 13 seconds or so. And it shut off. So when it shuts off like that immediately, well, it could be my wire was loose here. Let me try this again. It could have just been my wire. Let's do this again. I'm sorry. Within a few seconds, it should try to ignite. As long as I get spark, that tells me the cell switch is okay, the high limit switch is okay, and that it's trying to go ahead and ignite. Of course, there's no gas, so it won't do anything, but I should hear the spark. Alright, I'm not getting anything, so let me go ahead and test other stuff. I know I have to change the motor out. It could just be that it's too weak and that's not closing, so let me test the cell switch. This is a good video. I know it's going to be probably a little bit longer, but I just want to talk about how to test all these components to make it very complete. So let me turn my multimeter to continuity test. basically, that's all I'm looking for, that beep. So I'm going to put this on that, and we're going to try to light the motor. I'm not worried about the fuse this time. I'm not getting a beep because the motor's not strong enough to actually move that. So I had to push that with my finger. Now it should beep if it's a good cell switch, and I should get the furnace trying to ignite. Yep, cell switch is good. So it should try to ignite in a minute. And it shut off. Oh, because I had that disconnected. I'm so smart today. Let's do this again. Now, it should try to ignite. It's just one of those days. And it's trying to ignite. So, doing all of that, I'm able to confirm the cell switch is okay. There's no need to test the limit switch, but I will show you where it's at and how I would test it. So, let me back up, show you how to test a cell switch. Cell switch, you want to disconnect it because sometimes, since this wire is going through the board, you might get a beep, it might give you false readings. So always disconnect one, doesn't matter which one. And then you can test this. So again, continuity, we're trying to get it to beep. You can look at the resistance, but you don't have to. So it's staying steady. What I've seen sometimes, some models, mostly Dometic, when the cell switch is starting to fail, it might work intermittently. So when I do this, instead of one solid beep, it might beep and shut off and stutter a little bit, which means the cell switch is going bad, and you're better off just swapping it. So that's how you test the cell switch. This switch here has an on and off switch. Again, disconnect one, doesn't matter which. There we go. That one's kind of tight, so let me try this. They're both tight. There we go. So you're just trying to look for a beep. It's on, now it's off. On, off, which is telling me the switch is okay. I rarely change switches on furnaces, but I do tend to change them out on water heaters. So just a tip. If a water heater shuts off on electric, you could check that out, but cut power because it's 110 behind that switch on a water heater. So going back to furnace, cell switch, let me swap this around. There we go. And make sure this is focused. Alright, so I've got my phone there just to help me focus this camera. This is the high limit switch. The model we have here of the furnace is a SFV 35Q, so it's a suburban furnace, vertical, 35,000 BTU, quiet, which is the plastic fins inside and all. But, well, I don't have to disconnect both. With one, it's enough. So basically, what this is for is a safety device so that the furnace does not overheat. So when this gets hot, it pops and cuts power going through. It's actually just a signal. So it's opening it up to open contact so there's no signal. So if this were hot, let's say, it would cut power so nothing's going through. So that would tell the board, hey, this is hot, and it cuts gas off, but the blower will keep blowing to try to cool the core down. So same thing, continuity. It's beeping, which is showing it's good. So I don't have to worry about this. This is a good component. So that means the contact inside is closed so that the signal can go straight through. If you also want to test it, you don't have a multimeter, you could take both off and just connect them straight to a fuse. If it lights up, then that means you've got a bad high limit switch right there, which those limit switches are not expensive, same as sale switches. So let's go to the side. Let me just show you what the board looks like. Let me make sure this is focused again. Alright, so on this board, you can't really mess up wiring. You've got this that's connected straight to the board, this little connector with these wires. You only have 2 pins on the board up top, let me go ahead and disconnect this so you can see. And it's actually labeled what is what. Kind of stuck in there. There we go. And this. So if you ever had to change a board out, in this case, well, that one's tight. I won't worry about it. I'll just explain. This just pops right out. So you can grab it with some pliers, pull it out, tug at it. You gotta be careful if you're pushing from the relay from here. Any of these, you might rip those off. So you have to be careful. But it just slides out of the socket. Some models will have a little bracket here that's got a metal pin holding it, especially the Medic that's trapping the leg, so you have to take the screw off that's holding the metal piece, and you can split it open, remove that metal piece that's holding this in place so it doesn't pop out. Suburban doesn't need that because it snaps into place. So if I was to just push on this, I can get it to come completely out, but this is working fine, so I'm not going to bother. So when you're reconnecting it, it actually tells you blower and power. So the top, this one on the far left is the blower. So that's going to be this wire here, which if you trace it, it goes straight into that hole where the motor's at. And the other one is straight 12 volts that's coming to it. It's just power. So that's how you can hook these up. Besides that, the size of the connectors are different, so you can't really go wrong. The power will not fit on the blower, so it's totally safe to do that yourself. I'll leave this disconnected because I have to change the motor out, and I'll go through that process and show you how it's done. I've shown you before this specific model, so it's not complicated at all. I'll just finish this process of what I'm doing today, and you can just follow along if you want. Alright, so let me get right to it. The thing I hate about these newer models, Suburban, is they've got these plastic tabs, which often break. But here we go. Turn this off. There we go. It does have these two screws that are just tight around the motor, so I do have to remove these screws. These are the only two, since this one has clips instead of screws. I've said it before, but if you do end up snapping this over time, plastic gets brittle and it may snap, you could just run screws through it. It has the holes how they originally did this. So if it snaps, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. Alright, let's keep on with the motor. Alright, almost done. There we go. I'll just get these wires out of the way. So I have to get this black wire from the motor, and that's going to the block I mentioned before, which is this one right here. So I'll unplug that. If you ever run into a connector that's way too loose, all you have to do is just grab any kind of pliers and just squeeze this. Not too much because it probably won't fit, then you have to open it back up. But you just squeeze here in the middle to close the spacing you see there, that little gap. and it'll bite next time. So that's how you fix that. Alright. Now, let me cut this so we can get that disconnected. So the reason I was testing every component on this one, I already had an idea figured out it was a motor, so I already ordered that part before even coming out and diagnosing, just because of how the customer was able to explain what happened. With that, I was able to pinpoint, okay, we're going to have to swap the motor. But the reason I'm testing all these components is just because he's quite a ways out from where I live, and I just want to make sure we're okay with everything else, just to save another trip down the road if I have to come back for it. So let me just pop this motor out. It is stuck, but it just pops right out. There we go. There we go. So that's what we're dealing with, and that's what we're going to fix. So on this motor, let me show you. Right here, I'm going to get a tool. I've got a little Torx that fits. It's an Allen actually, but I've got a Torx that fits perfectly with a small tool I have to loosen that up, slide it off. And the same here, it's got the same screw in there that I have to loosen up to take these squirrel cages off. Alright, so this is the tool I like just because it can fit in there just to loosen it up. Alright, let me go grab the new motor and I'll just put it on as we go. So when you get a new motor, this is the original from Suburban. I get a whole set of screws. Like I said, if the tab snaps for some reason, you can always just go back and use these screws. So I don't need it in this case, so I'll just keep it as spare down the road. Alright, now the only thing to keep in mind, if you take both of these off at the same time and you're wondering, oh no, I don't remember what position it goes to, just remember where these screws stick out, that's what actually locks in. Let me show you the inside of this cage. So the motor actually slides in like so. The wires are going to go out of that hole, but this is the cutout for the screw, so that's pointed down, which means we need the smaller blower. But if you do it one at a time like I do, it'll just help you. You won't get confused. You just see, oh, the screws are pointing up. Okay, I'll do that. Super easy. Alright, got that done. Let me move on to the other side. There we go. I'll toss that later on. And the blower, of course, only fits one way because of the cutout this pin has. I don't know if you can see it right there. So it's not round all the way. It's got that slab right there on the side. So that's where the screw is actually going to bite. So there's only one way the blower will fit on it, this cage. Alright, I've got that done. So when putting this together, let me make sure this is focused. There we go. So when putting the motor back on, the only thing is it's got this pin. You could remove it But if you just go over it, it's okay. Once you get past it, everything else will go into place without a problem. Like I said, the screw goes into that notch, and this notch goes into the outside one. And since the hole is on the outside cover, I'm going to want the motor sticking out in this position. So all I have to do is push that in place, like so. That's it. And now we can work our way with this. So let me disconnect that just to be able to show you what I'm doing and all. So here we go. Wires going out of that hole first. And these wires, I'll just push them through, because sometimes if you're not paying attention, when you snap the cover on, since it's got these tabs that just snap into place, you could pinch these wires between the two covers. So you just want to make sure those are okay. Either pull them out, put the cover on, then push them through, or just make sure they're out of the way. So you heard it snap. It is on. So now all I have to do is feed this towards the back, and we'll plug it into that ground. Right there, that little block. The positive will go up. I'll zip tie it later just to keep it clean with this little igniter wire. This just goes back to the cell switch. There we go. So this I'll just zip tie to make sure it's clean. That's just me being picky. I like to keep my jobs clean. So I'll plug the blower in. I'll plug the spark in. And we'll plug the switch. Turn this on. And now I can plug it back in and test it. So I won't worry about my little jumper cable that I had. Let me just plug this straight in. Negative is on the left. Positive is on the right. And we join these two and it'll tell it to kick on. I just cut power so that you can hear me talk. So you saw right away the motor is rotating much stronger, and it closed that without me having to push on it. So we are okay with that step. And with everything hooked up, let's go ahead and test it all the way. Make sure we get it spark. So you should have been able to hear that spark. So everything checks out from my end. We know all the components are working, and we know it's trying to light, so we're good here. So yeah, I hope this video helps. It's a little longer, but I wanted to make it a little more detailed for you to give you specific instructions about these different components, how it works, so that you can get a little more familiarized with this process. So all I'm going to do now is fit this back in the hole, hook these wires up. What I love to use, alright, I'm back. So what I love to use are these connectors. Let me focus this. These are just Wago connectors. Basically the way that works is all I have to do is, let me do the blue ones because I have the power over there hooked up with Wago connectors. So you just slide this in once you have it spliced and ready. Just push it in and you close the lever and it locks down. If you ever need to work on this down the road, all you do is open up the lever and pull that out. The only thing is, after connecting these, I like these because it makes it easy to work on down the road if you ever have to work on it again. That's that easy to disconnect wires. You don't have to use those butt connectors, which let me show you what those are. So here's one of those butt connectors. And the way this works, you just push wires through. This is what I was using before. So if we have two different wires we have to join, you just push those into this connector and you have to use a crimper, which in this case, the tool I recommended before as a splicer and crimper, I just use that side. So it just squeezes on that metal tab in there, and that's it. It holds your wires. But these are easier just because it makes it to where it's easy to disconnect. If you do end up using these, I recommend, and RV industry does, just tape this up a little bit, just a little tape to wrap around it, just because with all the bumps on the roads and potholes and all, you don't want this to come loose, which I haven't seen it come loose, but it's just a safety measure. Put some tape on it to make sure it stays shut and wires don't pull out. So yeah, like I said, all I'm going to do now, I'm going to fit this back into the cage in the RV. I'm going to put the screws on all around it, so that way I can lift up the cage and get underneath it. Set it in its spot, screw the cage down, wire up these, which I'm going to test power there, make sure we are good. This is ground positive, so I should have 12 volts at these two wires, and hook this up to what goes to the thermostat. Then I connect gas. To connect gas, you tighten all the way, then you loosen it up just a hair, just to where it comes a little loose, and then you retighten. That's how you make a perfect seal. And I'm still going to do a double test. So I have a sniffer that I use to make sure there's no gas leaks, and I have a bubble test. I always do double test on RVs just because of safety, liability issues. I don't want anything going on, any fires going on. So I always just got into the practice doing double tests to make sure we are completely fine. And once it's all hooked up, I mean, I'll just jump these, make sure it lights in the box, that there's nothing else going on over there, which I'm not expecting any issue. The whole issue was the motor. So if it does ignite, that gives me the okay, let the customer know it's working, and yeah, just close the box up, we're good to go. So yeah, hope this video helps you guys. If you have any questions, you can leave those down below. I always try to pay attention to comments to answer, and if there's any recommendations for future videos, I'm always open to that. I've made some videos based on that for customers, just to give some tips. And if you want to know what tools I use in my different videos, I always add them in the description. If I'm buying parts or whatever, I usually put that in the description as well as what I'm using, just to help point you to parts a little easier. It's what I stick with. I know Amazon will sell you motors, maybe 60 bucks, maybe 30 bucks, but there's certain things you don't want to go off brand. In this case, stick with the original brand with the Suburban motor. I know NBK's okay, they have good motors, but I usually just stick with OEM. Work with warranties, work with different OEM companies, but it'll outlast any of those cheap Amazon ones, which I've seen people install and just die after 2 to 3 months. So totally not worth it. So I hope you guys have a good day. I'm just going to go ahead and add these screws and fit that in the box. Hope this video helps. See you next time.